In Tute06, we're going to start to look at the idea of using functions, and functions basically make your programming a lot more powerful. The first step is to actually figure out a few things about functions. Now I'm looking at this as an example. These are called word clouds, and essentially what they do is they take a bunch of text, they analyze that text for each word in the text, they count how many times a certain word appears, and they make the words that appear more frequently bigger, and the words that appear smaller, less frequently, slightly smaller, and then they get rid of other words so that you don't actually have useless meaningless words in there like the and but in there. But you can see here that we've got a word cloud working out here right now. Let's actually go over into Python now, and I'm starting to figure out how to do a word cloud. I'm using this testing sequence to figure this out. So I've got a sentence that I'm going to actually test it on. This is my words that I'm going to test and start to be able to analyze by sorting out what a word is and what a word isn't. So I need to tell the computer what a word is. So I've defined something called a word in my declare variable section. And I've also created something called a word list. The idea is that it'll analyze this sentence and put each word into a word list, an array, so that we can then analyze that and count how many words there are similar and work on from there. But this is just the first step. So we've got our word list, and the idea here is if we go through for letter in sentence, so it's going to step through each letter in the sentence. The first letter is the capital T, so it goes through some of these conditional statements here, and it gets to else, so it creates a word, and the word is going to be that word plus that letter. So to begin with, it's nothing. The first pass through, it's going to be the letter T. The second pass through, the letter is going to be H, so it goes through and adds that, so the word will now be TH. Then it'll do it again, and the word will be THE, which is the word the. The fourth one here, the fourth part here, so index number 3, is going to be a space. This is a special condition that I've set up, and when it sees a space, it says that that word is going to be appended to the word list, and then we're going to delete that word out of the word memory so that we can look for the next word. So basically it does that, and it's got this condition if the word is greater than 0, so it doesn't put empty words into my word list. So I've got that happening, but as we go through, we find that we've got a full stop here, and we don't want that full stop to be treated as a letter. So I've got another condition here that says that if the word is a full stop, if the letter is a full stop, then the word ends, and we're going to put that into the word list and then set the word back to being nothing again. So you can see there that that works, and if I run this, run without debugging, it goes through and it basically creates a word list, so it prints out that word list. So then I can start to analyze this, and of course if I actually did this, the biggest word would be the, because it appears 2 times. But this is a good start, and that's what I'm going for. What I have noticed is that this piece of code here and this piece of code here is the same. And when you have 2 sets of pieces of code that are the same, you can put them into a function. The advantages being that if you put it into a function, if I want to change this in any way, if I come up with a better way of doing this, and I can assure you that there certainly is, I just have to change it in one place rather than basically changing it in 2 or 3 places or even 5 places in the length of my code. I might use this exact same lines of code 20, 30, 40 times in my whole actual application that I'm writing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a variable. So I'm going to create a new section. I'm going to call this main, and this will be my main code. And above this section, I'm going to call declare or define. I'll call it define functions. And in my define functions section, I'm going to create a function using the def, the DEF for define, and I'm going to basically say add new word to list, all in one word. It can't actually have any spaces, and I'm going to open and close the brackets, and that is now a function. Not using the function yet, but everything in here will be the function. Just so happens that everything in there should be everything in here. Control C. and Control V. Now I can actually replace this code here with add, well there it is, new word to list. I made it long, but it sort of works to actually just type in, start typing it in and using that selection from there. So now you can actually see that I'm adding a new word to the list. It's easier for me to read the code now because rather than actually trying to read a whole bunch of logic and figure out what the logic was doing, I can just read the function name and say add new word to list. So therefore I've got maintainability, and I'm also using that code and editing only up here. Now if I run this, it's not going to work. Run without debugging. It's going to throw an error. There it is, the error is down here. So the error is that the word local is referenced before assignment. The problem you have, and this will be tricky to figure out to begin with, is that in functions, any variable that occurs, and you can see this variable is now white, it should be blue, it's blue down here. So any word, any variable that you use is going to be not working because the function has to have its own variables. Variables that exist inside functions are called local variables, and this local variable doesn't exist. And for it to exist, you need to actually make that word exist. Now I want to use this word up here, this variable up here, so I have to use the global variable. So I can make it appear in my function by typing in global word. And now that I've done that, that turns blue, and that one turns blue, and that one turns blue. So I'm using the main function here, the global function, the word. So that will actually help me to be able to use that in a way that's meaningful. And if I run it now, it works as expected. I know that might be confusing, but basically the upshot is that we have variables. When they're declared up here in this main line of code, they are global variables that can only be referenced in the main line of code. As soon as you call a function, which is a separate block of code, it's like its own sub-program, the variables don't transfer across. So the way you can cope with that is to declare that variable global. There are other better ways of doing this, but in the just to begin with, we're just basically going to put all our variables to be global so that we can use that feature in order to create this particular task. And we can now actually edit this code in one place and call it twice, 3 times, 50 times, as many times as we need to in order to actually make our code work. Our code is now easier to read and more maintainable.